Now, to be honest with you, this would be enough. This would be enough. However, we can go further. We can start thinking about range and whether there are any outliers in your data, okay? So the way to test outliers from Boxplots, it's a very simple rule, okay? The rule is, for an outlier, it needs to be 1.5 times the interquartile range, okay, beyond either Q1 or Q3, okay? So Q1 or Q3 plus or minus the 1.5 times the interquartile range, okay? So let me illustrate what that means. Effectively, let's have a look here at this bottom one, resort B. You found that the interquartile range was 6. Okay? So if you take 6 and you times it by 1.5, what do you get? Yep. So 1.5 times the interquartile range gives you 9. Okay? And here is the idea. You effectively look at both Q1 and Q3, the lower quartile and the upper quartile. Then you effectively just look at a distance which is 9 away from it. And if there is a point which lies outside that range, then you know it must be an outlier. So let me repeat that. Okay. You found 1.5 times the interquartile range. That's 9. You then look at either Q1 or Q3, and you look at a distance of 9 either side of each of those upper and lower quartiles. If there is a point which lies beyond 9 units away from that point, then you know it must be an outlier. So let me demonstrate. Okay?
How did you get the 1.5?
It's completely arbitrary. Okay? It's just statisticians kind of going, well, to be honest with you, as long as the data occurs between 1.5 times the interquartile range, then you know it can't be an outlier. Okay? It's just an arbitrary number, so don't worry too much about that. Okay? But let me illustrate what I mean. You took the interquartile range for the second one, that was not, times it by 1.5, you got 9. So let's have a look. Okay? If I start at Q3, just remind me, what was Q3 again? What was the value of Q3? Was it 32? I think it was, okay? So this was 32, so let me just write it underneath. And what was the value of Q1 for resort B?
26.
Was it 26? Yep, okay. So there...
Q2 was 33. Oh, wait, never mind.
For resort B? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a distance of 9 either side of each of these points. Okay? So let's start with this one, the upper quartile. If I look at a distance of 9, clearly I'm going to be looking to the right because any outliers will lie to the right of Q3. Yeah? And I'm going to look at a distance of 9. In other words, I'm going to look up to 41. Does that make sense? Because 32 plus 9 makes 41. Okay? Does every single point on the right of Q3 lie within 9 units away from 32? Does it lie between those points there? Yes, it does. Every single point lies within that range. So from there to there, because every point lies within that range, therefore there's no outliers on the right side. Make sense? Now if I do the same on the left, clearly any outliers are going to lie on this side. Okay? So I need to look back 9 from Q1. So here's Q1, it's 26. I look back 9 from 26, so where should I end up at? Should end up at 17, shouldn't I? If I look back from 26, 9 back from 26, 26 minus 9? 17, right? So 17 is here. Okay, 17 is here. So therefore, if there are any outliers, it's going to lie outside this range here. Are there any values that lie outside that range here? That one there. So therefore, this point here is an outlier. This point here is an outlier. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so basically it's just a case of looking plus or minus 9 from either Q3 or Q1. Okay, and then as long as it lies within 9 away from that point, then you know it's not an outlier. If there's any points which lie beyond that distance, then you know it is an outlier. So what you could do is do a modified box plot. This point here is an outlier, so I don't want to include it in the rest of my data. Hence, I'm not going to call that my lowest one anymore. I'm not going to call that one my lowest one anymore. I'm going to call this point my lowest one now. Okay? Because that's the next point after this one. Okay? That's now my lowest point, and I'll just leave that hanging around out there, just to show it's an outlier. Does that make sense to everyone?
So now the range is different?
Yes, absolutely. The range will be different. Because I'm calling this point an outlier, hence my lowest value is now this point over here. Okay? My interquartile range doesn't change, but this value does. This is now my lowest value. Okay? So this thing which I've drawn here is called a modified box plot. So when you do the 1.5 times the interquartile range test, and you change this point to be an outlier, so that's now my lowest value, we call this a modified box plot.